Buddy, how's everyone doing? About to message old Destiny here and see if he's ready. Destiny sucks. I mean, the thing about Destiny that I wasn't too familiar with him, other than like tweets, and it's hard to get a grasp on someone through tweets. I don't watch his streams, but he seems to be way more intellectually honest than the other people I've debated or talked to, like Vaush, or Seabass, or even like Prax Ben. He seems to be more intellectually honest. And I watched a debate that he had about Palestine, or not a debate, but a conversation that he had yesterday, I believe. And he said he agreed that Israel is an ethno state and that they, during the Nakba, they were committing ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians. So our contention was over whether or not Israel is expansionist. So I have a hard time believing that he's going to say Israel's an ethno state that's committing ethnic cleansing, and then deny that they're expansionist. I don't know. Maybe he will. I'm excited to find out, though. And I'm excited to have this conversation because he seems like a much easier guy to talk to than like a Vaush. So I just messaged Destiny and said, ready when you are. At a rally for Palestine right now, but we'll watch later. Yeah, I figured I know a bunch of our audience is at that rally in Washington, D.C. or on their way out there. So solidarity, obviously that's more important than watching my conversation with Destiny. So solidarity with everyone busing into Washington, D.C. Or going to that rally. Got Future Homestead saying they're going. Sebastian's on his way. Yeah, should be cool. Should be cool. There was an article on People's Dispatch basically just explaining that this is supposed to be the largest Palestinian solidarity rally in history. Where is it? Okay, I got like 2 minutes. 2 minutes, and we'll chat with Destiny. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Whatever. There's a People's Dispatch article saying it was the largest solidarity rally in history. 7.4 thousand viewers on Destiny's stream right now. Thank you, Eddie. This is important. Awesome. Yeah, hopefully we can bring some new people to the Midwestern Marx fam. What I'm really concerned about is the audio working correctly. I've been terrible in the past at live streaming Discord calls. There's just always a lot of echo and stuff, but hopefully this will work. But the Vaush debate, I didn't even stream like an idiot. So I didn't even get we didn't even get as much of a view boost from it as we could have, but hi, Eddie. What is the lumpen proletariat? Thank you, Daniel. So the lumpen proletariat is people who don't own capital, people who aren't capitalists, who survive under capitalism by like doing crimes or engaging in like black market stuff. So it's different than a wage laborer who sells their labor to somebody with capital in exchange for a wage. Lumpen proletariat could be like a thief or like a gangster or like a pimp. Someone who makes their living that way because everybody has to survive under capitalism. And if you can't get a stable job, a lot of times people fall back on things like crime. So thank you for the super chat. Great question. Eddie, Destiny is the final boss of Debate Bros. The Debate Bro meter of Vaush pales in comparison to Destiny. I like that, though. It seems like Destiny's more intellectually honest. Like I said, I don't think he's going to deny things that are true or try and score like quick, easy dunks. I think we'll actually be able to have a conversation about some of these things. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll just try and dunk on me. Either way, should be fun. Long-time follower here. I switch up usernames a lot. Got you. Thank you. 7,000 people didn't know he was that big. Yeah, he's pretty big, which is interesting because he's not, because he's ideologically just like an anti-woke liberal, basically. He's not with all the PC stuff, all the stuff that we've called wokeism, but he is a liberal, as far as I know. So Destiny's going to demand sources for everything you claim. That's good. I got a few. I mean, that's what I mean, though. That when I saw him talk about Palestine, with this this Israeli girl, this anti-Zionist Israeli girl, a lot of what they did was just looking through sources and trying to get to the truth of the matter and checking each other's sources and stuff like that, which I see as more productive than like a screaming match or a dunking match. So if he asks for sources, I'll gladly share them. I also got Marxism and the National Question right here, by our boy Stalin. Destiny said he was pro-genocide, by the way. Did he really? That's not good. I don't even know what to say to that. That is not good. What's up, Reclaimed? How's it going? So yeah, I don't even know what we're going to argue here. I think, I mean, maybe he'll make the argument that Israel's not expansionist, but I mean, Ben Gurion was literally quoted as saying we need to expel the Arabs and take their place. There's so many examples of leaders saying that, especially like the Zionist far right. And what I've learned in doing my research for this conversation, or doing a little extra research, which is really just this morning because I agreed to it last night. But one of the things I've learned a lot about is the internal politics of Israel. Because there's a lot of more moderate Zionists or left-wing Zionists who don't like Netanyahu. And Netanyahu, in order to stay in power, has now formed a coalition with like the extreme right wing. These groups that used to basically be considered religious fanatics and terrorist groups. So even since 1919 is when it really started. But a lot of those terrorist groups who have basically been the vanguard of the Zionist project and Zionist expansion are now the kind of people who are literally in power of the country. Oh my gosh. Thank you, the Black Pack, for the $20 super chat. Really, 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 really appreciate that. Thank you. That is a hilarious super chat too. Okay, Destiny messaged me. Ready for me to call? Yep. All right, let's hope this works. That's not what I want. This is what I want. Do I join a video call or do I do audio? Hello.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Going great.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, what did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Eddie Liger is what I go on, or go by online. Do TikToks and work for the Midwestern Marx Institute. We have a YouTube channel. I'm streaming this right now, and a website, and publish a lot of books and do stuff like that. So yeah.
All right, gotcha. Well, what did you? I think we were fighting on Twitter. Been fighting a lot of people on Twitter. What were we fighting particularly about? What did you want to address or bring up today?
Yeah, well, I'm a little bit like the original point of contention was I just saw this quick little TikTok clip of you basically saying that Israel is not an expansionist project, or Israel's not expansionist. So that was what I tweeted about. But then since then, I've familiarized myself with your position a little more and watched the debate you had with the girl. I believe her name was Kate, the anti-Zionist Israeli girl. And you said that you agree that Israel's an ethno state, and the Nakba could be considered an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. So I'm not actually sure where the point of disagreement is, but what would you say, I guess, to me saying Israel's an expansionist state?
I guess first, because now I realize some people are using different ideas of expansionism. What do you mean when you say expansionist?
Like a settler colonial project that is predicated on displacing Palestinians and annexing their land to add it to Israel, the Zionist state.
Gotcha. Okay, so my feeling is from 48 onward, I think it's really hard to justify that Israel is like explicitly an expansionist state, because I feel like every conflict preceding Israeli territorial expansion was constantly being provoked at worst and back and forth at best between Israel and their surrounding neighbors. I would agree that, like, for instance, like settler camps in the West Bank within the armistice, I would say that's expansionism. If you consider that within their militarily controlled territory, or I guess PA controlled territory, as being expansionist. But yeah, I think I would reject broadly that there's strong evidence that Israel was like expansionist since 48. Yeah.
How would you explain the fact that in the early 70s, there were 2,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank, and today there's over 500,000?
Well, that would have to be that because settler expansions have continued in the West Bank. But if you want to talk early 70s, if we're going to say that Israel was like a settler expansionist place, how would you explain that almost 5,000 settlers were removed from the Sinai Peninsula when the territory was given back to Egypt when the peace treaty was signed in 76?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So in 76, when Egypt and Israel signed their peace treaty, Israel forcibly removed all their settlements in the Sinai Peninsula, and then when they gave that territory back to Egypt.
Yeah, actually. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Doing research from this debate, for this debate, I've learned a lot more about the internal Israeli politics. And I would argue that it since the beginning, it's really been these extreme right, almost terroristic Zionist forces like the Irgun and other Zionist paramilitaries that could be described as terrorist groups who have been the vanguard of expansionism. There's always been this more moderate or left wing of Zionism that's been, that said Israel should be a state. It has a right to exist. Jews have the right to a homeland, but we don't believe in the mass expulsion of Arabs.
Wait, hold on. There's a lot of questions I got real quick, because you say left wing. You say the left wing were like that, but wasn't Ben Gurion, wasn't the whole foundation of Israel done by the labor movement of the Zionist movement? And those were the people that literally expelled people? Wasn't that part of the labor Zionist movement that did that?
Yeah,
Israel was created by left wing Jews. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I guess we have to get into, when I say left wing, I just mean anti-annexation and more pro-Arab Zionists have always been against this. But that's true. It was the labor wing of Zionism. But what I was saying is a lot of the violence has been carried out by these sort of terroristic groups who in the 70s, with those peace plans that you mentioned and with the retraction of some of the Israeli settlements, they were enraged by that. And it really radicalized a lot of Israeli society to the point where nowadays it's Netanyahu, partly out of political necessity, has had to form a coalition with these people who were formerly considered extremists, and those are the people who are now basically calling the shots in the Israeli government.
Sure, but let's back up a little bit. You, for the first thing that you gave me, you mentioned that since the 70s, the settler camps in the West Bank have expanded, which I agree they have. I also agree that that's wrong. But if Israel is just a settler colonial expansionist project, why did they give back the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt as part of the peace treaty, and why did they destroy all the settlements in the Sinai before they did it? Like, why wouldn't they use their settlements to say that, well, no, look, we've got settlers here, we want to hold on to this territory. We're a settler expansionist project.
I think it was an effort to make peace with the Arab countries and try and avoid a giant war between the Israelis and the Arab countries and the Arab Palestinians. And like I said, there were factions, Zionist factions, who said, yes, Israel has a right to exist, but we want to avoid a giant war here. We want to avoid the blatant expulsion of Palestinians and annexation of Palestinians. So at that time, I would say there was a more moderate government that's since been replaced by the far right, who was radicalized by those pieces.
Sure, I understand what you're saying. Okay, so, but I feel like, so one, you just said that they were willing to trade the land for peace, which makes it sound like if you're willing to make peace with Israel, then there'll be peace and they'll move the settlers away, number one. And then number two, you mentioned them being a little bit more peaceful back then. I don't know 100% that's true, but that peace treaty that happened between Israel and Egypt, the prime minister of Egypt at the time was, I don't know how to pronounce his first name, Menachem or whatever, Begin. That guy was literally the leader of the Irgun, who was the more militaristic terrorist pre-48, 1/3 of the early Israeli Defense Force, right? So it seems like even with that guy who I think you would agree, because you mentioned the Irgun as being the terrorist group, even that guy who used to be the leader when he was prime minister, when Egypt wanted to make peace, he was like, oh, fuck it, we'll get back this land, we have a peace agreement, we'll destroy the settler camps, we bring them all back, and then boom. So I'm just curious, in your mind, how do you reconcile? Because if you just say, well, it's because Egypt wanted peace, then couldn't I just use the argument oh, well, listen, if all the Arab countries wanted peace, then peace would be had?
Yeah, I think they all wanted peace at the time. I think, like I said, there were factions in Israeli society that wanted peace. There were the Arab countries wanted to bring an end to the fighting and the annexation of Palestinian land and have some of that land returned. But since then, that's what radicalized a lot of the far-right settlers whose ideology is really akin to neo-Nazism and a lot of...
Hold on. Far-right settlers have nothing to do with neo-Nazis. I don't know where that came from. You said Arab countries wanted to bring an end to the fighting. When?
In the 70s, when they signed those peace accords.
Okay. Wait, hold on. Okay. So...
because they needed peace at that time because they were threatened by Egypt, because the 1973 war showed that the Arab forces were powerful and that they were a legitimate threat to the Israeli state. So they basically needed to sign a peace agreement with them or back off on the expansion and settler colonialism.
Sure. If the Arab countries wanted peace with Israel at that point, why did they suspend Egypt from the Arab League for 10 years after Sadat signed the peace agreement with Israel? Sadat, who would, by the way, later go on to be assassinated by somebody that opposed those peace deals.
True. I shouldn't have said all the Arab countries. I should have said Egypt. Obviously, there were other Arab countries and, of course, factions within those countries who were anti-Zionist still.
Okay.
Sadat, and by the way, Sadat was viewed as a traitor for that by a lot of people within Egypt for agreeing
and the Arab world. Doesn't that kind of speak more strongly to the pro-Zionist narrative that the Arab world, the entire Arab world, was united in seeing Israel as an enemy? So much so that having a peace.
I mean, why wouldn't they see Israel as an enemy after the Nakba and the continued expansion of Israel's borders?
So I can understand being upset at the Nakba. That's arguably fair. I think it's arguably fair. But then at that point, what you're telling me and I kind of agree with you, I think, but I don't know if you agree with the argument you're making. The pro-Zionist narrative is that after 48, the entire Arab world wanted to destroy Israel, and that was Israel's justification for how they fought with the rest of the Arab world. Given that framing that it seems like you've given me, do you think that in the 50s, 60s, 70s, should Israel just said, okay, well, we're going to pack our whole population up and leave? Or what do you think Israel should have done? What was their like morally righteous path at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Israel has a legitimate right to exist, but okay, I think they should have brought in, or they should have tried to negotiate, said, okay, we have our existing borders and we have our state, but we're not going to continue with the project of Palestinian ethnic cleansing and the expansion of Israeli borders. I mean, it's hard to say, what specifically they should have tried to negotiate for, but.
Well, in 1947, the UN put out a partition plan that put forth borders, and they agreed to that, and Palestinians and all the surrounding Arab states rejected it. So that was almost the founding of the country. Do you think that would have been part of those negotiations, or?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I missed that.
In 47, there was a proposal for how the land should be divided. It would have been, I mean, now historically, it would have been the most land that Palestinians would have ever gotten. But the whole Arab states refused that 47.
Oh, the UN, the UN peace plan that they rejected. I mean, the Palestinians had no say in creating that UN plan. They had no seat at the table. It was just textbook colonialism, and well before 1947, the Irgun and other Zionist extremist groups had already been committing massacres and engaging in this project of settler colonialism and pushing Palestinians off their land. So there was no reason for Palestinians to accept that or believe that Israel's expansion would stop if they did accept that.
Sure. So I understand what you're saying, but this is where I'm telling you that by your own words, the Arab world has basically lost any argument saying Israel is a settler colonialist or expansionist project, because they constantly say over and over again, we don't believe you and your borders, Israel, we're going to attack over and over again. So like, let's say theoretically in 47, Israel and the Arab states would have agreed to the partition plan. If after that, Israel would have continued to expand their borders, well now, okay, well you guys are literally just an invader who's trying to expel Arabs and conquer more and more territory. There would be a legitimate argument.
I mean, they were already ethnically cleansing Palestinians, though, and committing horrific massacres before that. And now Palestinians are supposed to come to the table and say, yes, we'll accept this plan that you drew up without any of our input.
Well, first of all, the plan was drawn up by the UN to try to account for like where the people lived, where the most Arabs lived and where the most Jewish people lived. But like the massacres have been going on back and forth for the past like 20, 30, 40 years, right? It wasn't just the Jewish fighting forces massacring the Arabs. The Arabs were also attacking and killing a lot of Jews as well.
They were resisting as the vastly greater armed Israeli extremist groups were moving into Arab land and pushing them off of their land.
Okay. Let's say, okay, again, I don't know if it's worthwhile to explore pre-47. If you want to, we can, because there are big massacres there that happened from the Arab side onto the Jewish side. Again, there's a reason why the Irgun and everything existed. It wasn't just because they hated Arabs. But let's say I grant you all of that, okay? At 47, there's a ton of people there. What was, and they were like, okay, well, we're here now, we're settled here now. They're willing to form a nation where 45% of the population would be Palestinian Arabs. And they said that they would do that. But all the other surrounding Arab countries didn't want that. And then they all go to war with Israel. Like at that point, from 47 onwards, how do you call it a settler colonial project when it's just all the Arab countries attacking them over and over again?
Because I don't agree that it was just the Arab countries attacking them over and over again. I mean, if you pull up the human cost of the these statistics don't go that far back, but the British were funding the import of the Zionists who were ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. So I think it's a little bit ridiculous to tell the Palestinians, as these European Jews are moving into their land, killing them and then taking their land, that one, you're not allowed to fight back at all. You're not allowed to resist. And two, you have to accept this UN plan that you had no say in. I mean, that what Israel was doing was textbook expansionism. And you can say oh, the Palestinians fought back and the Palestinians committed massacres. Okay, that was still Palestine, and a lot of and almost all the Zionists were coming over from Europe and settling on Arab land. So it's the Arabs who are being pushed off of their land and massacred. So they have no the onus isn't on them to just accept the plan proposed by the Western powers. And I mean,
Sure. So to be clear, there wasn't like this, I don't believe there was this huge ethnic cleansing pre-47. The Nakba refers to the ethnic cleansing that happened post-Israel War of Independence, right? So I don't know if there's the same strong argument that they were just fighting back from invaders. I mean, you could argue that any Jewish people immigrating there, they might felt were invaders.
I mean, as early as 1919 was when the British started funding what did they call it? It was like the Zionist coalition or something. But that was 1919 when Zionists started going and surveilling the area and started moving in. And groups like the Irgun, who again are just extreme right terrorist groups, were extremely active throughout the 30s and 40s as settlements were increasing, and Palestinians absolutely were being pushed off their land prior to 1948, which is why, I mean, there were so many settlers there already when they did actually draw up the borders and make Israel a thing.
Sure, but I mean, this is in response also to attacks on Jewish people, right? Like you mentioned that the Irgun gets more active.
They moved into Arab land and took the people's homes and pushed them off their homes in response to attacks against Jewish people, or are you saying in response to all the anti-Semitism that was in Europe?
I'm not. We're not even talking about anti-Semitism. I'm just saying that like in I think the most famous one was at the end of the 20s. There was the big Hebron massacre that killed, I think, like 50 or 60 Jewish people. I don't even know how many Jewish people were in this area. We read this at one point in time.
Right, but that's Europeans in Palestinian land. So how does that disprove that Israel is expansionist? If there are attacks by Palestinians,
I'm not saying that. Listen, I think that if you want to make the strongest argument for Jewish invading of like the Middle East, I think that pre-47, I think there's an interesting discussion to be had there, where I would like slightly favor the Arab claims that you've got Europeans coming and settling part of our land. I think that there's an argument to be had there, okay? But we're not in 100 years ago, right? So
right, but it's only continued. I mean, like I said, in the West Bank.
That's what I'm trying to say. Post 47, what is the example? After Israel is declared a nation, once Israel has a state, what are the examples, or how are we making the argument that they're a expansionist country after 47?
The amount of land that they seized in the 1967 war, the increasing of 2,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank to 500,000, which, I mean, is ongoing. There's a lot of people who call what is happening now an ongoing Nakba, because the settlements and the demolitions of homes, which is how Israel expands, that's why we call it a settler colonial project, have continued since 1948. And I mean, this has been the plan all along. This has been the ideology of Zionism all along. We move in here, we take the land from whoever's living there. And
yeah, I understand that. I understand the statement of like it's been the plan all along, but number one, I don't know how we account then for Israel giving so much land back in 78 and them destroying so many settlements in 78. And I don't know how we can blame Israel for the 67 taking of territory when it was all of the other Arab countries that were at war with them in these territories.
I mean, I would argue that Israel started the 1967 war, and we can get into that later if you want. But
what is the argument that they started the 1967 war?
Because Israel's not just this. Like I said earlier, Israel's not just this like godly being that can do whatever it wanted. There was a Palestinian refugee crisis at the time, and all of this resistance towards the Zionist project. So they basically had to roll it back a little bit, which then radicalized the far right, so the Zionist project could continue to expand later on. History is not just a straight line. The settler colonialism isn't just a straight line where Israel grows and Palestine shrinks. There have been ebbs and flows in times where Israel has had to put the brakes on or even roll back the settler colonial project a little bit. But I don't think that proves that they're not expansionist, because, like I said, the settlements have not only continued since that time, but increased as the far right has gained a greater foothold in Israeli politics.
Yeah, I understand we keep saying this, but I'm saying that aside from settlements in the West Bank, almost all the territorial expansion has come off the backs of Arab conflicts versus Israel that the Arab countries seemed very hungry for.
You can't just take people's land and demolish people's homes because they're resisting you, or the indigenous population there is
Yeah, but
resisting
I'm
the
asking like,
Zionist settlers.
so do you think that basically, do you think that the Arabs since 48 have had a right to destroy Israel for the next 80 years?
I think Palestinian Arabs do have a right to resist, because I would classify Israel as an ethno-state, which was founded with British support, and then in the 60s, the U.S. took over with heavily funding Israel. I'd say as a Western expansionist project that was founded on top of the Palestinian homeland. So I would say Arab Palestinians have a right to resist, and it makes sense
Sure.
that
So two
Arab
things.
countries around in the same area, especially the ones like Syria and Lebanon, who have also had land seized by Israel, that they would resist that.
What land did they have seized by Israel, and why though?
Because Israel's an expansionist project, and the Zionist idea is to create this place called Greater Israel. So in the case of Syria, like the
Don't you
Golan
think
Heights.
don't you think that if places like Syria and Lebanon would stop attacking Israel constantly for the past 80 years, that Israel would have a much harder time having lands like this or proving themselves in the international community? Don't you think there'd be a lot more criticism against Israel if these places weren't constantly used as staging grounds for Fedayeen attacks, for terror attacks, for militias to train out of to attack Israel?
No, I think Israel would stop expanding, because that's what the Palestinians did at first. The Palestinians welcomed the Israelis, which actually the Palestinian Hospitality Code allowed the Israelis to collect a lot of data on Palestinian villages, which were later used for the attacks that took place during the Nakba. So they tried
Hold on.
peace,
That is
and they tried.
wait. That is ahistorical. Palestinian Arabs absolutely did not welcome the Jewish people when they first started to get shipped in by Britain. I'm pretty sure there was violence almost from day one.
The in the 1930s and 1940s, there
the
the
1930s, literally
Palestinian
1929 is literally the Hebron massacre. From 36 to 39 are literally the Arab revolts because they're so upset and they want all these people kicked out. It got so bad that Britain was literally capping the amount of Jewish people allowed to immigrate to the Middle East because there were so many protests and everything against it. Like, so the idea that Arab Palestinians were welcoming of like the European Jews, that's not true at all. Which is fine. Also, I don't expect them to be welcoming. I mean, like, they're literally Europeans coming to resettle their land.
It sounds like you do expect them to be welcoming, though, because you're saying, why don't they just stop fighting back? Why don't they just accept everything that Israel's doing? I mean, even in
wait. Timelines. Bro, if Arabs are fighting back against Jewish people coming pre-48, fuck it, that's your land. If you want to fucking fight for it, fight to the death. I think that's totally fine. I'm not going to criticize Arabs for fighting pre-48. But once the country is declared in 48, and it seems like there's enough Jewish people there, well, fuck. Well, at this point, what are you going to do?
Well, let's go to modern day then. I mean, look at what happened during the Great March of Return. That was a massive peaceful movement where Palestinian refugees tried to return to their home, and over 200 of them were picked off by Israeli snipers.
Hold on. I'm sorry, could you explain when you said tried to return to their home? What do you mean by that?
Well, what they did was they just walked up to the Israel-Gaza border. And they formed these mass demonstrations, and over 200 of them were killed. But the idea was, we are trapped in an open-air prison because 75% of people living in Gaza are people who have been pushed out of their villages, their rightful homeland. So they staged these demonstrations where they went near the Gaza-Israel border, which were entirely, I shouldn't say entirely peaceful, because there were certain
Molotov cocktails, there were rocks, there were
they threw rocks at the snipers, so Israel's justified
not just rocks.
Shooting
Hold on, not just rocks. It was also incendiary balloons. It was also Molotov cocktails. It wasn't just rocks. But
and look at the amount of people who were murdered by the Israeli forces during those demonstrations compared to the amount of Israelis who were killed. I'm showing it on my screen right now, but
yeah, I mean, I would expect the IDF is a lot more armed and capable, sure. But I don't know why.
Right. So what are the Palestinians supposed to do in terms of resistance then? And of course, you're always going to, even if you try and state something peaceful, you're always going to have, sections in your society who want to make it violent, especially if you're talking about people who have been colonized for 70 years now.
Well, we're not talking about sections of your society. We're talking about Hamas as the ruling force, along with Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip. This isn't just a section, right? It's literally the ruling government for... almost 20 years in this.
Right, but Hamas
land, right?
was part of one of the organizations that helped organize
defunded?
those protests, and we're calling for them to be peaceful.
I mean,
And of course,
whether
Israel's
that's
always
true or
going to say,
not.
"Oh, they threw rocks at us. We had to kill 200 of them." I
Wait,
mean, that's what
you
they
keep
do
saying
every
through
time.
rocks. You do acknowledge the incendiary balloons and the Molotov cocktails, right? I don't know why you keep saying
I
just
don't know. I
through
haven't
rocks.
read about that, but I did read that during the March of Return, the vast majority of protests were peaceful, but there were some incidences of violence. So I didn't look into what those were exactly, but
Okay, yeah, but when you say the vast majority were peaceful, how many people? Do you know how many people were involved in these protests?
lots.
Sure. That my understanding is I need to go check, but I think it was like over 10,000, right? So
Yeah, they were
if the
huge.
vast majority were peaceful, which I think I might even agree with, that might be true, but it's not like the IDF didn't kill 5,000 people, right?
No, they killed 200. So
Sure.
what's the
So when you
cutoff? How
say,
many people are you allowed to kill? How many peaceful protesters are you allowed to kill
well,
before
you
it
tell
becomes
me,
a
if
bad
there were
thing?
Molotov cocktails and there were incendiary balloons, if 10,000 people protested, I mean, like what percentage of them were violent? What percentage of them do you expect to get shot? I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know. The source that I read said they were largely peaceful with a few instances of violence, which of course were picked up by the Zionists and the Zionist media, who then said, we had to kill 200 of them. They used that as justification for the crackdown on the protesters.
Sure.
So obviously, what I'm saying is they're going to embellish, negative things that Hamas or the Palestinians did.
Sure, I agree with that. And I'm pretty sure there's actually a UN report that I think looks at every single shot person. And I think the UN says that there was only one person that truly posed a security threat at the end of those shootings. So the other 230 whatever people were probably not justified.
Gotcha.
That's your Steelman version of arguing against the IDF there. But to say that it was a completely peaceful protest or they just walked up to the wall and did nothing is absolutely not true. That's not even remotely true of how that march went.
Right. That's why I didn't say that. I said the vast majority of them were peaceful with some cases of violence, which were greatly embellished by the Israeli state.
Okay, possibly. But yeah, we're not closer. You asked me what I think a solution would be on the Palestinian side. I can give you what I think a solution is, but first I'm curious, what do you think the solution is?
It's hard. It's hard to find a solution at this point after 70 years of colonialism. I mean, if I was in Palestine, I would probably, if I was in their position, I imagine I would be taking up arms and fighting. I probably.
So you support Israel, or
no? No, I said if I
do
was
you
in the
think Palestinians are ever going to win? Do you think they're ever going to win a violent uprising against Israel?
Yeah, if Hezbollah and the Houthis and the Arab nations get involved, I think that's definitely possible that the Israeli state could be toppled, which, I think avoiding a regional Arab war that could lead to nuclear war. I think we should avoid that at all costs, but I definitely think the Zionist entity is a paper tiger, so to speak.
A paper tiger, the people that have won and survived in this region on the backs of their military conflict for 80 years, defeating a dozen Arab countries in every single major war. That's a paper tiger.
Yeah, they've got this air of invincibility about them. But I mean, what happened in 2014 when Israel actually went into Gaza was they got beat back by Hamas and they took like 40 casualties. And because of the constant missile strikes that they've been launching into Lebanon, nothing has helped Hezbollah recruit more than that. I mean, if your friends and family are getting killed by Israeli missiles, it makes sense that would motivate you to go join an anti-Israeli militia like Hezbollah. So they've been recruiting and gaining numbers and gaining power. And now, of course, the Nasrallah said that he doesn't want to incite a regional war. So Hezbollah is not opening a second front against Israel right now. But if they did, along with Yemen, Syria, potentially Iran, I do think that they could topple the Zionist entity. Of course, the U.S. doesn't want that, and that's why I think you're seeing a huge military buildup sponsored by the Biden administration in Israel right now, because they want to avoid that. But I do think the toppling of the Israeli state is something that could, by the Arab countries and Palestinians, could happen.
So you think that as time has gone on, as Israel continues to expand into the West Bank, as U.S. support for Israel has remained relatively strong, as multiple Arab countries post the Trump administration have signed bilateral peace agreements with Israel, and as other powers around the world, like the Houthis in Yemen, Iran, continue to wane, you think that Israel's position is worsening as time goes on?
Militarily, yeah, I think there's and I mean that too. There's also a huge internal crisis within Israeli politics, where there are now some people have suggested that there might even be a civil war within Israel because so many people are against Netanyahu, less so for his expansionism and more so for his corruption and the fact that he's now created a coalition with all these far right groups. But I do think globally public opinion is really, really turning against Israel, and I do think that the Arab militias who pose the greatest threat to Israel in the region have been strengthening.
And you think post October 7th, you don't think that united, you don't think Israelis feel a stronger justification than ever for keeping the walls around Gaza? You don't think October 7th united the Israeli people in thinking that people from Palestine explicitly endorse terrorism? You don't think other countries saying they're going to start removing aid from Gaza, which, by the way, is one of the wealthiest aid areas in the world, you don't think that's going to hurt Gaza and help Israel?
No, I do think, I mean, 92% of Israeli society agrees with what they're doing. And there's a great article now that was published on Consortium News called The Gaza-Israeli Catastrophe, the Strategy of Tension, that basically explains that is Netanyahu and the far-right coalition strategy, is to say, ignore all the corruption and bad stuff that we're doing. We need to unite right now against Hamas. And I think it's a strategy that's been working, but I don't think that strategy proves that the Israeli state is invincible and that they could win a war against all the Arab militias and countries in the region.
Do you know what the fighting force is from like Hezbollah in Lebanon? You really think that Hezbollah, if they did a full-on invasion into Israel, you think they would win that conflict?
I don't know. I think they could if they waged a guerrilla warfare with the aid of Hamas and with the aid of obviously Iran would get involved then.
How are you going to wage a guerrilla warfare in a and you're not your own country? That's not what guerrilla warfare means.
Does guerrilla warfare have to be in your own country?
That's typically how it works. Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know if there's a such thing as an offensive guerrilla warfare, or is that? Can somebody tell me in chat? Is that ever happened?
I don't know. We're gonna learn something here today. I don't know. But yeah, I do think that if they launched an attack against the Israelis, they would have a chance of winning. I'm not a military analyst, but I think that's highly likely with the way that they've been strengthened. And you got to keep in mind a lot of those Israelis too. Like you said, yes, they've been radicalized sort of against Hamas by the recent events, but also you have a bunch of people hightailing it out of there and leaving. A lot of these people are Europeans, and I think that the Arab Palestinians might fight harder and longer than a lot of the IDF soldiers and a lot of the European soldiers. But
even though historically that's never been the case,
right? Because they've had them completely outgunned. But now with this sort of,
but now that Israel is the stronger military, now they're in a worse position.
Yes, yeah, I think the other countries have strengthened themselves, and these other militias to the point where they can contend with Israel, and I think Israel's sort of status and the way that people view them as this sort of invincible entity that can never be defeated because of all their military victories in the past, like you said. I think that's sort of a myth that they are actually invincible. Like, what do you think? So, like, say the Houthis and the Hezbollah and Hamas launch I guess we won't call it guerrilla war, but they launch a ground invasion against Israel. And I say guerrilla war like urban warfare, like they're fighting in the streets. You think that Israel would just be able to squash that and move on very quickly?
I don't know if it'd be very quickly, but I think Israel would crush them. That would be my understanding. What is the I don't know what Houthi and Hezbollah have in terms of air power. Do they have like air forces or fighting aircraft or trained pilots that are considered capable pilots in Hezbollah in Jordan? I'm not sure.
I don't know. Good question.
Hezbollah armed strength. Control F. Air Force. I don't even know if Hezbollah has an Air Force. So also, I don't know the Houthis in Yemen. Is Yemen still in a civil war? Is that country even like stable? How like what is the Houthi fighting?
The
force in
Houthis
Yemen?
are militia. They're not the government, but yeah, the country's in not a
So do
great.
the Houthis have it? So
not a
they
great
probably don't have
state.
any aircraft, right? And what is Yemen going to be traveling through through Saudi Arabia to fight with Israel? Is that? Do you think?
Well,
is
right
Saudi
now
Arabia
they're
going to
just
be?
right now they're just launching rockets, but yeah, I mean that's why I say guerrilla warfare, because if they did do it, they would wage a sort of asymmetrical urban warfare against the Israelis, which is something that the Israelis have never faced. They've won a lot of short wars that with the overwhelming power that's been handed to them by the British and the United
Hold on.
States.
Overwhelming
but
power
they've
was
never
never
fought
handed to Israel. Wait, real quick.
overwhelming power
Handed
at
to
the
Israel.
time. But if the
Wait,
Arab
not even at the
countries
time. Wait,
were
at
to
what time?
wage
When
an
was?
asymmetrical sort of guerrilla war against Israel, I think it's very likely that Israel loses.
Wait, when did you think overwhelming power was handed to Israel?
I just mean the U.S. and British funding of Israel that allows
When
them
was
to
the
have
US?
much more powerful weapons than the Palestinians.
When was the U.S. and Britain funding Israel that allowed them to have much more powerful weapons than the Arab world?
Oh, you should look up what's it called? Hold on, I have it here in my notes. Look up the something concrete. The cement incident. So Israel or Britain was shipping, and maybe it was actually Belgium, but European countries were funding Zionist settlers, and they got caught shipping weapons into Israel to arm up the Zionist settlers in the 40s, I believe, because there was what they thought was a cement package, and it burst open, and a bunch of guns and ammunition found out, and they found out that they were arming up these.
Hold on.
The
Wait.
Europeans were arming up these
Yeah.
Israeli paramilitaries, and then in the 60s,
Britain
also sponsored
one thing at a time. The cement incident, okay, was not Britain giving them weapons. Those weapons were smuggled
into. Where did they didn't they come from? Belgium? Maybe I misunderstood it.
Yeah, but they were smuggled.
Right, so they were smuggling arms into Israel, which is what gave them greater military power and greater weaponry than the Arabs.
Yeah, but they were buying them. They weren't being supported by the British. The British were getting ass mad that the Israelis were doing this. For the whole first war, Israel was covertly smuggling arms from Czechoslovakia as well. But it wasn't because the British were supporting them. The British hated that. The Jews were buying these and smuggling them themselves. They weren't getting support from British to do this.
Okay.
So I don't know. We have this idea that Israel only exists because Britain or the U.S. was supporting them. That's not true through any of the early major wars. It was just Israel supporting itself, and then
I mean the
Jews
British
from around the
troops
world
did
that would
train
donate
the Haganah on how to attack Arab villages, and they were the ones who funded, supported, and facilitated the original Zionist Commission. I should look up what the actual name of it was. But they were the ones who originally funded and propped up the Zionist expansion into Israel in 1919 was, I believe, when that started. So it was tacitly supported by the British. And then in the 60s, when the U.S. took over, is obviously when the U.S. military-industrial complex started arming
the British.
Israel to the teeth.
Wait. First of all, you're pivoting to a whole bunch of weak points because almost every single thing you're saying is wrong. So initially you pivoted from this, but the British and America did not fund early Israel. Number one. Number two, the early Haganah, that the fighting force, okay, was not trained by the Brits. It was Jewish people that had come under the first and second Aliyah that had partaken in earlier wars, that had been part of the British Army, that took part then in becoming part of the Haganah. The British Army did not train the Haganah early on. It was just there were people that had immigrated after like World War I that became part of that fighting force. So the idea that the early militaries, or that the early Israel was being supported, that doesn't even make sense. The Soviet Union was massively supporting the Arab nations. Britain's support was generally thrown behind King Abdullah in 48 after the War of Independence. So the idea that Israel was getting all the support, I'm pretty sure the Arab nations were getting more support from other countries officially than Israel was, at least up through 67.
If you, in Ilan Pape's book, do you know who he is? He's
I'm familiar with him.
Israeli
Yes.
scholar. Yes, he does talk about the Haganah being secretly trained up by the British. So we can look into that that source if you want. But either way, regardless of how much funding and support they were getting from the British when the Zionists were when the settlers were moving into the British mandate in Palestine, which did, eventually became a disaster for the British, where they were like, just get us out of here. We don't want to deal with this anymore. Doesn't change the point that Israel's expansionist, regardless of how much direct support they were getting from the British.
Okay, when were they getting this? Okay, pre-48, you keep jumping around in the timeline, okay? To refocus this, okay? After 48, when there are a ton of Jews in the area, they declare independence and they make their country, okay? At that point, do you support the surrounding Arab nations' explicit goal to destroy Israel and either do another ethnic cleansing of all the Jewish people in that area? Is that something you support?
Which Arab country said they wanted to do an ethnic cleansing of all the Jews in the area?
Well, that's what the goal was after the 47 partition plan was rejected and the Arab countries wanted to fight.
Their goal was to do ethnic cleansing? Who said that?
Literally all of them. That was the goal of that first war.
Literally all of them said we want to ethnically cleanse the Jewish people from this region. They didn't say that we want to get rid of the state of Israel.
What do you think that means?
Getting rid of the Israeli state and having not an apartheid where you have a state that protects Jewish people and systematically deprives Arabs of their rights, and you just have one state where people who are Jewish, people who are Arab, people of every kind of ethnicity can live and have equal rights.
How are they being? Wait. What do you mean by deprived of rights, apartheid, or whatever? Did you just say apartheid in 48? What does that mean?
I'm saying that just because they wanted to. All I'm saying is that just because they wanted to get rid of the Zionist state, the Israeli state, does not mean that they wanted to ethnically cleanse all Jewish people. That's a leap that you made. You said that because they wanted to get rid of the Israeli state, the Zionist entity, that means they wanted to ethnically cleanse all Jewish people. And I'm saying, no, that just means they wanted to get rid of the Israeli state and have one state of Palestine where people can live equally under the law. And I mean, the Israeli state wasn't always an apartheid, but it absolutely always favored Jewish people over Palestinian Arabs. I mean, Ben Gurion and the early leaders at the time were explicit about that. Can we go back to the British forces being trained or the training?
No, hold on, wait. One topic at a time. Okay, you're jumping around to so many different things. Okay, in 48, if the Arabs would have won that initial war, what do you think they would have done? What do you think would have happened with the Jewish people that had come from Europe that they viewed as foreign invaders?
I don't know. I don't think we can assume that they would have been ethnically cleansed. I think they would have established a state that would have been called Palestine, and then they would have allowed people to live there.
Wait, why do you think they would have established a state called Palestine?
Because that's what the region has always been known as, and it was even called Palestine when it was under British. It was called the Palestinian British Mandate.
For an area that
Palestine for like 1,000 years.
No, it had never been considered. That doesn't make sense, right? The British had a territory that they marked, and they had a lot of mandates for different areas here that they had called Palestine. But there weren't like a group of people there that were like, we are the state of Palestine, or there was some territory recognized as Palestine or whatever prior to the British mandate of Palestine.
Yes, there was. That's what every major state and political group referred to that region as Palestine, where the Palestinians live. And that's why when the British gained control over it, it was called the Palestinian Mandate. I mean, this is what Zionists always do, is try and play the semantics game and say, no, Palestine has never existed, when, for years that region was called Palestine. And even when it was under British mandate.
Sure. Can you show me one map or one leader or one occupying force or somebody that identified this area as like the territory and borders of like Palestine? Like, are you telling me, was this like were they called Kayats or whatever of the Ottoman Empire, or was it prior to that, or like?
You want an exact source of someone calling the region Palestine? I mean, that's what the British called it. They called it the Palestinian Mandate.
I agree. And before the mandate Palestine, the borders weren't identified as such. That's my argument. I don't know why you're pointing to the British. That's my argument.
Okay. I have a source here. I don't remember if it was the Ottoman Empire or what. I can't find it right now, but...
Okay. So for the 1947 war, okay, the Secretary General of the Arab League declared in 47 that if a war were to take place with a Jewish state that hadn't been announced yet, that it would be, and I quote, a war of extermination and momentous massacre, which will be spoken of like the Mongolian massacre and the Crusades.
Who said that?
Abdul Rahman Hassan Azam, who was the Secretary General of the Arab League from 45 to 52.
So you're saying that him saying that means he wanted to ethnically cleanse Jewish people after winning the war. I mean, I just don't agree, and I think that that attitude among Palestinians and among Arabs came from the colonization and the seizure of their land.
You don't think that sounds like a quote?
No,
Can you show me?
It sounds.
Can you give me a quote? Can you give me a quote that sounds like that from the Jewish side about Arabs?
Yeah, David Ben-Gurion said we will expel the Arabs and take their land. I mean, that was explicitly what the Zionist project was all about from the beginning. And you
expelled it and take their land from after what?
What?
After what?
That was prior to 1948. That was when Zionism was first becoming a thing and settlers were starting to move in. He explicitly said, we need to expel the Arabs and take their land. And the difference between what the Arab League leader said and what Israel said is the Zionists actually did it. The Zionists actually did start massacring Palestinians and seizing all of their land and ethnically cleansing them, which you've agreed to.
If that was the case, then why is it, if they wanted to do this, if they wanted to expel the Arab people from the land, why did they agree to the 1947 partition plan?
Sorry,
why is it that in the founding?
At a source.
Why did they agree to the 47 partition plan? Why did Israel in the initial Declaration of Independence invite Arab people to stay in Israel?
Because that was a huge seizure of land for them. That founded the state of Israel. Why would they disagree to that? Why would they disagree to the founding? That's what they wanted. They wanted to found their own Jewish state. Why would they say no?
Sure, but in the initial founding of that, because we're talking about whether their goal was explicitly to expel all the Arabs.
Their goal was to found a state which they said would not be possible without the expulsion of Arabs. And there were more moderate Zionists at the time who said we don't need to expel the Arabs. But the argument that won out was Ben-Gurion and the more extremist one saying we cannot live.
If that was the goal to expel all the Arabs, why is it that literally in their Declaration of Independence did they say that we will build a state with Arabs here? How does that make sense? Did they just lie? Is it a lie in their Declaration of Independence?
Yes,
or?
And so the Zionist project has always been about expelling Palestinians and taking their land, but that has not always been the face of Zionism. They have not always said that explicitly, and you can look at letters that Ben-Gurion and other Zionist leaders were writing to each other. You can look at the statements of the leaders of the Irgun and other Israeli paramilitaries who are more radical, and they would and there were times where they explicitly said we need to compulsory expel, or we need a compulsory expelling of the Palestinians. Sorry. Now, today, as this far-right coalition and Netanyahu have taken power, you have authorities in the Israeli government who explicitly say this. So what they've done is taken the mask off of Zionism. And this is why a lot of Palestinian resistance fighters literally like Netanyahu and some of the extremists, because they take the mask off of Zionism rather than lying about it, rather than saying, no, we don't hate the Palestinians, as they expel more and more Palestinians off of their land and
only in response to war around them. Also, that Ben-Gurion quote apparently is a fabrication. I've heard this before, but I just brushed on this. Obviously, it comes from Pepe, who most people actually accuse of being pretty shoddy in Israeli history. But the quote, the origination of this quote. Who's most people? As in most of my understanding is most of the new revisionist Israeli historians consider Pape to be a bit shoddy with his workmanship. So I believe like people like Avi Schleim, I don't think that Pape, he doesn't think that Pape, I don't believe, is a credible historian at this point. I think Benny Morris has made statements that are incredibly critical of Ilan Pape. Pape is literally the only historian that you pro-Palestinian people will cite on the Israeli side, but I'm pretty sure he's been criticized many times. And the origination of this quote is one of the things that he's been criticized for.
Okay, well then take Burl Katznelson. He was one of the ideological leaders of the Zionist movement in the 1930s. And at the 20th Zionist conference, he said, "My conscience is completely clear. A distant neighbor is better than a close enemy. They will not lose by their transfer," meaning the transfer of Palestinians off of the land, "and we certainly will not. For a long time, I've been convinced this is the best solution, and it
Wait, who
must
was this
happen one of
guy?
these days."
Who was
This
this
is
guy?
Burl Katznelson, who was one of the ideological leaders of the Zionist movement in the 1930s. And there
In
are
the
lots
1930s,
of
was he?
there are
Wait,
lots of quotes like this.
Was he in Israel?
Katznelson, I can't remember if he was a settler or not. I think eventually he did go to Israel.
Okay, because I'm not, that name's not ringing any bells in terms of like Israeli leadership
Look
to
him
me.
up.
As being, okay, what was his name?
Burl, Berl, Katznelson, Katznnelson.
His wiki is like 5 paragraphs long, so I don't think he was even a
Okay,
part of the 48.
He's not famous enough to
government.
take serious.
Well, I'm looking for statements or actions from leaders or the country of Israel to try to see like what the beliefs were.
Okay,
of the
how
country
about
at the time.
Zev Jabotinsky, who died in 1940 and was one of the founders of the Irgun, who said it's utterly impossible to obtain voluntary consent of Arab Palestinians. Look, historically, colonization can't be carried out with the consent of a colonizing people. So that was Jabotinsky arguing against the more moderate Zionists, saying, explicitly saying that Israel is a colonialist project and arguing to them, we cannot have the Palestinians won't voluntarily leave. We need to force them to leave.
In what year did he say this?
It would have been probably the 1930s.
What do you mean probably? Do we even know?
I don't know the exact date of the quote, no, but that quote is very genocidal and explicitly in favor of expelling Palestinians. And you asked me to produce quotes and Zionist leaders who have explicitly argued for annexing Palestinian territory, and he does.
Yeah, to be clear, I haven't asked you to produce quotes. I'm asking for like a comprehensive understanding of the region at this time period to give me examples of this happening, not one-off quotes. If we wanted to play like one-off quote games, I can give you a ton of pro-Arab quotes by like Ben Gurion, who was like the first.
That's what you did. You gave a one-off quote of a Palestinian leader and said, "Can you give me any examples of Israeli leaders saying something similar?" And that's what I did.
No, hold on. I'm sorry. I didn't give you. No. I didn't just give you a one-off quote. I gave you the quote after explaining the actions of all the Arab countries in that region. The action, the more important part, was the fact that all the Arab states were willing to go to war with the newly formed Israel, intentionally to destroy the country. It was probably going to be to expel the Jews afterwards, right? Because there was a ton of violence in that region against Jewish people and against Arab Palestinians from Jewish people in the years preceding. The idea that you think that they would have just destroyed the nation and had them all live there happily ever after, do you really think it would have happened? Is there any evidence for that? Given all of the
but is there evidence that they would have committed a systematic ethnic cleansing? No, you're saying probably. You're assuming and saying Israel should be allowed to do ethnic cleansing and colonization because probably if they didn't, the Arabs would have done it. And also it's still Europeans moving on to Arab land. So the Arabs have a right to resist. The Europeans moving in don't have a right to massacre the people who are already there.
Okay, there you go. So you think that they did have a right to, when you say ethnic cleansing, also, what do you mean when you say ethnic cleansing?
Like the forced displacement and murder of Arab Palestinians to try and remove them from their homeland.
So forced displacement counts as ethnic cleansing.
And put them in well, they not entirely, because they want the Palestinians to go to Iraq or Syria. They want them to join Arab countries, at least the extremist Zionists. So I would say that's ethnic cleansing because they want to get rid of the Palestinian Arabs as a people.
Okay, if they wanted to get rid of the Palestinian Arabs as a people, why is it that all of their like wars or taking of land happen after all the Arab countries go to war with them?
I disagree with that the Arab countries simply started these wars. Also, by the Zionists moving in and seizing Arab land, they're stealing land from people and they're being the aggressors. keep coming
Okay,
back
so
to
then
this.
your
It's the
position
Europeans
is
moving in and
yeah,
stealing the
I
land.
understand.
So
You don't have to
if the
repeat the
Arab
same point over
people
and over
take
again
up
because you're
arms and defend their own land, that's not them attacking
gotcha.
the Israeli, or I mean, I guess it is, but it's them defending their land from an occupying and colonizing force.
Okay, so your position then is that after 48, all forms of violence and aggression are justified against the Jewish people there.
I wouldn't say all forms of aggression. I think it's always, I think the international norms and rules of, not international norms, but rule of law should be followed. So no targeting of civilians or using of chemical gas or things like that. But I do think military resistance by the people having their land colonized is something I support. Yeah, I support the national right to self-determination.
Okay, I don't know what you just said. Do you think that post 48, do you think that all the surrounding Arab countries have had like an indefinite justification for the destruction of the country of Israel?
Yeah, that's Palestinian land that Israel was founded on top of. I think they have a right to resist the state of Israel, especially because the expansionism and the settler colonialism never stopped. So it's a continued seizure of more and more land and the pushing of people out of their villages and their homes that they lived in for hundreds of years. And yeah, I do think they have a right to resist that. And 75% of people in Gaza are people who've been pushed off their homes. And I think they have a right to resist that and return to their original home, their original village. Yeah. Which,
Okay,
I mean,
so
it's, sorry, you go ahead. I talk too much.
Would you say then that like October 7th was an example of like positive resistance against an occupying force?
I mean, positive is hard to say because it's obviously a tragedy. And when you have hundreds of civilians being killed, but I think it was that the Palestinians are justified in taking military action against their occupiers, and I think the reason that Hamas is so popular in Gaza is because of the devastation that Israel's been inflicting on them. I mean, one child was being killed per day before any of this popped off. In Gaza, obviously, over 90% of the water is undrinkable. There's an economic blockade. It's a horrific situation. And yeah, I do think military action is justified. I think that they should avoid, like I said, follow the rule of law and try to not target civilians and only target military installations. But yeah, I do think a military action by the colonized people is justified.
So do you think that the targeting of civilians is a war crime?
The deliberate targeting of civilians, I'm not that up to date on international law, but I assume it'd be considered a war crime.
So do you think Hamas committed a war crime on October 7th?
To the extent that they targeted civilians, I would say that was a war crime. Yeah. There's a lot of evidence now that a lot of the civilians were killed by Israeli forces, and IDF was ironically using basically human shields, setting up positions behind Israeli civilians.
Sure. To be clear, there's absolutely no evidence of that, aside from some TikTok videos claiming as much. If you have any, I'd love to see it.
Okay.
Secondly, would you then consider that all of the Qassam rockets that have been steadily pouring out of the Gaza Strip that are targeting civilian villages near the Gaza Strip, do you think that those have been bad actions by Hamas since 2007? Or 2005,
to the extent that they target civilians, and obviously it's hard to say because they're basically fighting with jerry-rigged fireworks, but yeah, I think they have the right to fire rockets at military installations for sure. And
they don't fire at military installations.
If you look at the amount, again, if you look at the amount of deaths inflicted by the Israelis compared to the Palestinians, it's not even close. So to hyper focus on the Palestinians firing rockets when Israel's killing one kid per day with U.S. funded missiles on a regular basis, I mean, it's a response to that. It's a response to the colonialism. And no, it's not good. No, I don't look at it and say, oh, this is fucking awesome. Look, Hamas is launching rockets. No, but it's an inevitable response to the fact that they've had their land stolen and plundered and had their children massacred for so long now.
You think it's an inevitable response that you have to send rockets for 15 years from a region of people that don't have water to drink? You think that's a good way to advocate for the people in Gaza?
I think that's the only option that they have because, I mean, violence is always a people's last resort, or generally a people's
Really?
last
Do you think the
resort.
situation in
I
Gaza
think
has
when they
gotten
tried to
better
do
or
things peacefully through the Great March of Return, they got massacred by the Israelis. So yeah, like I said earlier, if I'm in Palestine, yeah, I'm probably grabbing a gun and joining the resistance at this point. I
so
don't
do
know
you
what
think
else to
that
do. They're trapped in a fucking
yeah,
open air prison.
has the situation gotten better or worse in Gaza since Hamas has taken over?
I mean, that's impossible to say. It's been such a tragic situation, but even then, I mean, the Israelis are the ones who expelled the PLO to Tunisia and then carpet bombed their headquarters when it was in Tunisia. So the Israelis are
I'm
the ones
sorry.
who dismantled and assassinated
Why did
the
the
secular
Israelis
left
expel?
resistance in Palestine, which allowed Hamas to step up and say and become the main political party.
First of all, who expelled? The PLO was expelled from where?
From I don't know where PLO's headquarters were actually. They were
Pretty sure
expelled
they
from
were
the region
expelled
and they
from.
went. I know they were
Pretty
somewhere in
sure.
Israel, Palestine, and
Yep.
then they went to Tunisia.
Pretty sure they were expelled from Lebanon. Do you know why they were in Lebanon?
No.
Because they tried to coup the king in Jordan. And then they got kicked out of Jordan after trying to coup the king. And then they were sent to Lebanon, where they started to take over territory in southern Lebanon. And then eventually they were expelled from Lebanon. PLO committed a lot of terrorist attacks in the early founding of the PLO. So the fact that Israel would try to expel them or fight with them is not very surprising. But also, I don't know why we'd bring up the PLO of the 70s and 80s and compare that to anything happening
Because I'm saying
today.
that was the main resistance force prior to Hamas, and you asked if the situation has gotten better under Hamas, and I'm trying to say I don't agree with Hamas's ideology. I don't share their worldview, but I view Hamas as a response to the Israeli aggression. The reason that Palestinians were so eager, or not Palestinians in general, but Gazans were so eager to vote for Hamas is because Hamas was actually willing to do something. Hamas was actually willing to take up arms. And at this point, in this desperate situation that a lot of Gazans are in, that's what they're looking for, is a fighting force who will take on the Israeli state. So I think, whether or not Hamas has put them in a better situation or not is sort of irrelevant, because the situation that they're put in is an open air prison and apartheid and a blockade enforced by Israel.
You can keep repeating
Hamas
the
is
same
just a
points
group
over and
that
over
the people
again.
have chosen to resist that.
I know the TikTok videos and the Twitter talking points, but it's not getting us any. I don't know how you think any of this is moving.
Why is it none of this is coming from Twitter? I read all morning to prepare for this debate, books and stuff. It's not all from TikTok, I promise.
You read books this morning, multiple books. How quickly do you read?
I'm that good. I have a super processor of a brain. No, I'm just saying literally none of the arguments I've given you so far have been arguments that I got from a TikTok or Twitter.
I'm just saying that repeating the talking points of apartheid and open air prison doesn't get
not
you any
talking
closer.
points. It's true.
They don't get you any closer. They don't get you any closer to. They don't get you any.
Amnesty International said it's an apartheid. It's not a Twitter.
And how is that? How is that? And how is that helping for the Palestinian people right now?
How's what?
How does calling it
apartheid?
Yeah, is that helping anything right now?
Yes. Look at how public opinion has turned against the Israelis. The largest Palestine solidarity march in history is taking place in Washington, D.C. right now.
By a bunch of white people that don't know or give a fuck about the region. You think they're going to care a month from now? Because what do you think is going to hurt more? The fact that Palestinian fucking Marxist 19-year-old white kids are marching in the West? Or the fact that now a lot of countries are starting to pull funding from Gaza or the Palestinian Authority, period, because of the terror attacks that came from Gaza on October 7th? What do you think is going to help or hurt more?
A lot of countries have suspended diplomatic relations with Israel, too. The main countries who are backing up Israel right now are the U.S. and their peons, their allies in West Europe.
I'm pretty sure
this is massively turning public opinion against Israel, and that is a bad thing for Israel because that will strengthen Arab militias in the Middle East, and that will strengthen resistance in the U.S. to the U.S.'s endless funding and military buildup of Israel.
Gotcha.
Will we actually be able to get our government to do anything about it? I don't know. That's why I'm a communist and I support overthrowing the government.
Gotcha. So there aren't the idea that all these major countries are cutting diplomatic relations off is not true. Countries like Saudi Arabia are even more interested in exploring a normalization of relations. Other Arab countries have, especially post Abraham Accords, have explored normalizing relations with Israel. The Palestinians are finding themselves increasingly cut off from Arab supporters and the rest of the Arab world. And now you've got people like you on the internet advocating for more fighting, more death, more killing. None of this is going to serve the Palestinian people. There's no shot that a violent uprising topples the Israeli state. I just don't understand, aside from a LARP, like nothing that you're advocating for realistically is going to help the Palestinian people in 5 or 10 years from now, ever.
Massive uprising against Israel and the turning of public opinion against Israel and the strengthening of anti-Israel militias is good for it. I mean, how can you argue that any of what's going on right now is good for Israel? The only part that's good for them is it allows them to push forward their plan to expel 2 million Palestinians to the Sinai Desert. But I mean, to say that public opinion is on the side of the Israelis right now is absurd.
From who? In America, public opinion has dramatically shifted in favor of Israel after post the October 7th attacks. You're just wrong on that. I don't know where you get that.
Look at the most recent UN vote to condemn Israel. It was like,
who the fuck cares about a UN vote to condemn Israel? What does that have to do with anything? Look at the fact that Germany was talking about pulling all their funding from
Israel. I mean, I don't know if they have any globally done polls, but if you looked at global polls, I guarantee you the vast majority of people would be against Israel's actions in the Gaza Strip right now.
Okay, so you think that a UN condemnation vote or whatever, or a UN resolution, you think that's reflective of the opinions of people around countries around the world?
That's the reflection of their governments and their government leaders' opinion, which in some cases, depending on how democratic that country is a reflection of the people's opinion. The UN voting to condemn Israel is definitely a sign of public opinion. Yeah.
Gotcha. So you think that the only solution for this problem right now is the military toppling of the Israeli government. That's what you think?
I think what we should be calling for as Americans, and especially Americans with political platforms, is for Joe Biden to cease all funding of the Israeli apartheid state now. I think I'm not going to lecture Palestinians on what they need to do or Hezbollah on what the best route forward for them is. As Americans, we need to demand that we stop sending $3.8 billion a year to Israel, because look what they're doing with our money.
Look what Gaza is doing with the money. Do we stop sending money to the Palestinians as well?
We're not giving the Palestinians nearly as much money as we're giving Israel, and we're giving the Palestinians humanitarian aid. We're giving Israel weapons sold to them by American weapons contractors. So it's a very different thing.
We don't give weapons to Hamas because it's a literal terrorist group. That is true.
Right, but we're arming up Israel. So to say that aid to Palestine and aid to Israel is the same thing is not true.
I didn't say it was the same thing, but I'm pretty sure we're also like the largest contributor of aid to Palestine as well. Should we just cut off all aid to that region?
No, we should cut off any funding of the Israeli state, because it is an apartheid state and it's doing a genocide. And we should end all arms sales.
We should keep funding Gaza that launches rockets indiscriminately.
We should keep giving humanitarian aid to Gaza, because we're not giving them weapons. We're not giving them weapons. We're not arming them to the teeth the same way we are Israel.
How much of this is co-opted by Hamas and is just used for terrorist attacks? How is it that a region that constantly says is running out of food and fuel never runs out of supplies for rockets? How is this happening? Something is obviously fundamentally broken in this area. We can't just say that, like, oh, well, if Israel just plays nice, everything's going to get better. That's clearly not true. I don't even think you believe that.
No, like I said at the very beginning of this conversation, at this point, finding a solution is going to be extremely difficult and extremely messy. But what the U.S. can do is stop giving Israel $4 billion for unrealistic
solutions. You're not advocating for a realistic solution.
Right, and I'm telling you, my solution as an American who lives in America is for the American government that I pay taxes to stop funding the Israeli state and stop buying the missiles that they're dropping on.
That doesn't solve anything. What is the solution there?
15 minutes.
What do we think is the solution for the problem? How does this problem get solved? How does it look better for Palestinians going forward?
Probably through just give them political rights. Just let them out of Gaza and give them political rights. If you do that, the majority of people in the region will be Arab, and the state of Israel, as it currently exists as an ethno-state, will cease to exist. If you give Arabs in that region their basic human rights and political rights, then and this is John Mearsheimer, an American political scientist who made this point, as many other people have. If you give Arab Palestinians in the region rights, if you stop having Israel be an ethno-state that deprives them of rights, the state of Israel as it currently exists will cease to exist, because Palestinians won't vote for that. They won't support that politically. And this is why the state of Israel is dependent on not allowing these people to have basic political rights, because they won't vote for the project of settler colonialism and apartheid.
Sure. So the only thing that you're opposed to, or rather you think the solution is it has to be a one-state solution, and that's the only thing that'll solve the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard a proposition of a two-state solution that seems super realistic to me. But I also haven't
the
looked
closest
into it
the region
super
ever got to
closely.
peace was almost with a two-state solution.
I mean, maybe a two-state solution could work too. I was just giving you my perspective. Yeah, I support a one-state solution being a dictatorship of the proletariat, working class of all ethnicities and religious backgrounds and skin color get equal rights.
Okay. Well, Hamas is a group that's like avowedly Islamist, so I don't know where you're getting
Right,
like,
I don't agree with them ideologically. This is, I'm saying in a perfect world they would be a dictatorship of the proletariat, but the first step is to give everybody in the region, regardless of ethnicity or skin color or religion, equal political rights. And if you do that, the Zionist entity will cease to exist. If you can propose a two-state solution that seems workable, I might support that too. I got to head out in like 5 minutes here.
We can
though.
leave in like
Sorry.
1 minute or 2 minutes.
Okay,
Do you think
cool.
that if a one-state solution happens, if the walls come down around Gaza, do you think that violence will increase, decrease, or stay the same for Jewish people in Israel?
If the walls came down tomorrow, I mean, I don't think that's how it would play out. That's how the end of the apartheid would play out. But I mean, yeah, if you just took away the walls right now, they'd probably just fight each other. But if you allowed Palestinians to return to their homes, yeah, I do think violence and support for violent resistance groups like Hamas would cease, especially if you gave them political and economic rights that they've been deprived of for so long.
So you think that if all of the millions of Palestinians went back to live in Israel, you think that as long as they were allowed to vote, you think they'd be happy? There'd be no more violence?
No, it would be a very difficult thing, and obviously now there's all these ingrained ideas of, Israelis have anti-Arab ideas, Arabs have anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish ideas. So that's the legacy of colonialism, just like our country in America has had to deal with the legacy of chattel slavery. So it's not going to be perfect. But yes, moving towards giving those people economic and political rights is better than keeping them in an open-air prison and systematically depriving them of those rights.
Okay, so then you'd be in favor of this, knowing that there would be probably a dramatic uptick in violence against Jewish people in Israel.
I mean, it's impossible to say, because how are we actually doing
by looking
this?
At how many people like you are in support of the October 7th attacks.
So what's your solution? What's your solution to simply just keep these people in an open air prison and keep them under a state of apartheid?
No, I would say there should probably be a two-state solution that's negotiated.
So how should that work?
There's several countries that probably need to come to the table. Probably has to be Israel, probably has to be Jordan, probably has to be Iran, probably has to be Syria, and then there needs to be some independent mediator, whether that's the United States, whether that's China, somebody that can ideally advocate on behalf of Israel's interests, and then a peace agreement needs to be made with these countries, and then clear borders need to be delineated for the Palestinians and the Israeli people to live under.
Sorry, last question. What would the Palestinian borders look like under a two-state solution? Because obviously you have Gaza and the West Bank that are, in different places. So what would their borders look like?
Prior to state solutions, there was a suggestion on the Israeli side of building an overground train system and an overground highway system that would connect the Gaza Strip and the West Bank with each other.
Well, yeah, I don't know. If someone proposed that, maybe I would support it.
Gotcha. Do you still stand by the statement that the Palestinian resistance fighters get you fired up and that they're a courageous and powerful group of people?
Hell yeah. Shout out to the Palestinians. They've been fighting for when I was at wrestling practice today, I was getting tired, and I thought of the Palestinians who have no water, who have no food, who have been deprived of everything, who are born into an open air prison, a concentration camp.
That open air prison that has more humanitarian aid flowing into it than almost any other region in the world. It's really sad that the leadership there co-ops almost all of it.
Even the IDF, even Mossad said that the conditions in Gaza are completely unlivable. I mean, that's nice that there's a lot of aid goes.
Why did they
keeps
say
the
that
people
those conditions are
alive. They're
livable?
still in a
Maybe if they
concentration
spent more time building houses and less time building tunnels, maybe the conditions in Gaza would look significantly different.
Yeah,
Maybe
it's all their fault for sure. It's all the
well,
Palestinians'
they definitely
fault.
don't
It
do
has
themselves
nothing to
any
do with the
help,
economic blockade. It has nothing to do with the blockade, the fact that they're constantly having missiles dropped on them, or the fact that Israel doesn't
constantly
allow
having missiles dropped on them. You're talking about Israel and you getting missiles dropped on it from,
and the fact that Israel doesn't allow construction materials into Gaza. It has nothing to do with that. It's all the Gazan people because they're just a bunch of Arabs who don't know how to build stuff. All they know how to do is bomb. So like Ben
Who says
Shapiro.
Arabs that don't know how to build stuff and all they do is bomb? Who said that? There's plenty of thriving Arab countries that are surrounding Israel.
Right, you were trying to blame the Arab Palestinians for their economic conditions as if those conditions haven't been imposed on them by colonists.
I don't think Israel imposed the conditions that Gaza needs to be controlled by a terrorist group that co-ops all the funds for terrorist activities. No. Sure. Are you telling me that that's an inevitability, that Arab people are just naturally drawn to terrorism? Are you telling me that that's the only way that
they're drawn to resistance when you colonize them and steal their homeland, like anybody ever. Like every group of people who's ever been colonized throughout history have eventually taken up arms and resisted that occupation. I think that's what's going on in Gaza right now. But either way, I really appreciate you for having me on your show, and I appreciate this discussion. I think you're a more intellectually honest person than any of the other people I've debated, so I appreciate the conversation.
Gotcha. Well, I hope at some point you learn literally anything about this region, and maybe your opinions will look less retarded, but given that you have Marxists in your profile, it's probably never going to happen. So,
okay. I should have asked if his wife is around. Dude, Destiny's wife is hot. That's the one thing he's got going for him. What'd you guys think of that? You like it? You like it? That was fun. He was mad. He was big mad. He ended with thank you for this conversation. Thank you for allowing me to come on your platform. He's like, you don't know anything. You're retarded. Okay. Okay, Destiny. Wow, ad hom, typical Destiny. That's kind of the thing I respect about the guy, though. Like he doesn't do the PC culture stuff. He's a lib, but he's not the most insufferable type of lib. Bro, you've gotten so good. You did well. Thank you. Glad to hear that. He's a smart guy. I knew he would be. I knew he would be articulate and try and set some traps. I didn't know it would devolve into a debate. I thought it would be more of a conversation. But I was giving him too much credit. When I heard his opinions on that other stream, I was giving him too much credit. He's really, really more pro-Zionist than I was hoping, but because you're a Marxist, so hopeless, blah, 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 yeah. Just wait, folks. Just wait till socialism and Marxism continue to gain popularity, because I was right and Destiny was wrong. Public opinion is turning against Israel. Public opinion is turning against the empire. Public opinion is turning against capitalism and capitalist imperialism, and Marxism is going to be the future, and liberalism will be the past. So, and history will show that. Did a good job, Eddie. Thank you. Like the Cope Olympics in here. Yeah, that's what Vouch's fans kept saying. I'd just be like, I thought that debate went well. I thought I brought up some good points. This part could have been a little better. And people are like, Cope, you're coping so hard. Okay, I guess. Why is he such a lib Ben Shapiro? I don't know. That's kind of his MO. Let me go through these super chats here. Great work, Midwestern Marx. Thank you, Meme Boy. Thank you very much. Appreciate you for the $20 super chat. All of our Institute's funding comes from you, the viewers. We have no outside sources of funding, so it all comes from you, and that's why we're the Institute by the people and for the people. People still supporting apartheid in 2023 is crazy. Yeah, but to Ziga, it's difficult to end apartheid because the Palestinians and the Jewish people in Israel don't like each other right now. So we just have to accept apartheid and let it last forever. Or we have to support some pie in the sky two-state solution. Yeah. Israel's as real as... Oh, yeah, I already answered that. Well, I got to get going soon, folks. That's what happens when you not read and just eat propaganda. Yeah, but all those books that I read, like Ilan Pape, you know, they're all wrong, you know, because Destiny said so. That's funny that he accused me of getting my arguments from TikTok and Twitter. Like, dude, I don't even spend that much. I spend almost no time on TikTok other than making videos. And I spend no time on Twitter. And all morning before wrestling practice at 12, I was reading. All morning I was reading. So yeah, shout out to the RTSG, the research collective. Hold on, I should do this before I go. I do got to get going here, but they helped me out with my research this morning. RTSG, I believe they're called. They've got that guy Rev. Rev is one of their people. Lev Lascaris, researcher at RTSG. I don't know what it is. Obviously, they are buddies with Infrared, it looks like. But yeah, they helped me do a lot of research. So shout out to them. They gave me a bunch of sources that I would have had to gather by myself otherwise. So amazing job. People may not want to accept it, but no one can argue he made good points. Destiny did, or I did. Either way. Yeah, he's a smart guy. I knew he was gonna make decent points, and I knew there might be some places where I had the information slightly wrong. So I tried to be humble about it when that happened. Say, you know, well, what do you think? But Shula mentioned Real News Network at Vaushan. We might want to discuss that. Oh, geez. Did they really? That's too bad. Thank you so much, Cobra Commander. Thank you so much. Appreciate the $5 super chat. The mental gymnastics he went through is insane. It was, wasn't it? At some points I was kind of surprised. I'm like, come on, you're a smart person. You don't really believe this, do you? You're not really running in circles like this, are you? But if we don't accept the apartheid, Palestinians might get hurt. Hilarious. Israel says the two-state solution will never have it. Yeah, that's how I really wanted to get out of there. I didn't want to be talking to him anymore after an hour and a half, but yeah, I don't think Israel rejects the two-state solution. I think two-state solution is just a thing that liberals say. So they can say, you know, I condemn all Palestinian resistance fighters, and I want a peaceful two-state solution. Well, okay, how the hell is that ever going to happen? No, like Destiny said, the U.S. will mediate a peace process. Yeah, fucking right. Like, you really think the U.S. is going to do that? The U.S. is going to come in and say, yeah, I know we've been funding Israeli expansion, colonization, and apartheid for the last 50 years or whatever, but now we're going to negotiate a peace process and give the Palestinians their own state. Yeah, right. It's a liberal pie in the sky solution that lets them pretend that they're in favor of a solution and pretend that they're in favor of a non-violent solution, so they can accuse us Marxists who support the Palestinian resistance of being the bad guys, and portray themselves as the good guys because they're pacifists. But really, what you're just doing is supporting Zionism and settler colonialism then. Because while you say, you know, I support a two-state solution, this pie-in-the-sky idea eventually coming about, Israel's still expanding, still killing Palestinians, still launching missiles into the Gaza Strip, still systematically depriving people of their rights and demolishing homes in the West Bank. So the two-state solution is a way for liberals like Destiny to feel good about themselves. And while still supporting Zionism and apartheid. Why am I getting these bread tubers on my feed? I'm sorry, Battle Cossack. It's probably because I talked to Destiny, and now you're getting all these bread tubers here. Appreciate it. Yay, Eddie. Thank you, Pacheco. Great job, Eddie. Thank you. Thank you. It's crazy how disingenuous Destiny is. Yeah, true. Some of the things he was saying, I'm like, dude, that's just a lie. I'll have to go back and watch the debate to figure out where, but or a couple times where he said something I was saying wasn't true. And I'm like, it is true. Or like when he said, you know, this is what the leader of the Arab League said. Can you show me examples of Israeli leaders saying something similar? And I gave him 3 examples, and he didn't. He's like, I don't want just random quotes. I'm like, motherfucker, you literally just asked me for random quotes, and I gave you random quotes. You said I don't want random quotes. And those were ideological leaders of the Zionist movement, who said those things about expelling Arabs. I mean, it's not hard, dude. This stuff's out in the open, but Destiny also isn't skeptical enough of the American news media, right? He doesn't realize that they're run by corporations and cartels and the same people who control the government and the same people who have economic interests in having a neo-colonial outpost in the Middle East, which is really what Israel is for the West. Great job, Eddie. It's a shame that he ended the convo in that manner and dipped. I'm sure a lot of his supporters picked up on that. Thank you, Pop Satch. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not made maybe or designed for this like internet streamer world. They're all so snarky. They're all kind of mean. Like, I know we had our political disagreements, right? We had our disagreements in the conversation, but I was still able to end the conversation by like saying thank you. Thank you for having me on your platform. Thank you for the discussion. And he ends it like literally like, dude, like a kid, like a second grader who's pissed off. You don't know anything about the conflict, you stupid Marxist. All right, guy. My Midwest sensibilities, it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, why don't you treat people with decency and respect? So thank you so much for the $20 super chat, though, Pop Satch. Thank you for all of these super chats coming in. Israel definitely wouldn't bomb the train. Yeah, that part was hilarious. We'll just build a train connecting Gaza and the West Bank. Like, dude, this is why we need to send Destiny to Gaza so he can see what the situation actually is. Go to Gaza and start telling the people, hey, guys, stop supporting Hamas. Hamas is mean. Hamas uses violence. What we're going to do is build a train connecting this and the West Bank. And Israel will still exist. And yes, they might be killing one Palestinian every day. And now they're killing one Palestinian every 15 minutes. And yes, they've been doing this for 70 years. But we're going to be friends now. And we're each going to have our own state. And Israel's definitely not going to attack our state. And they're definitely not going to attack the train that we built connecting the two Palestinian regions. Like, it's so convoluted and stupid. And it's just naivety about what the Israeli state is. It's naivety about what the Zionist project is. Like, go ahead, build a train connecting West Bank to Gaza. See how fast the Zionists blow it up. Gifted. Thank you, Daziga. Appreciate the Midwestern Marx membership. Agree with you, Eddie. Great job. Thank you. Hopefully we get a little boost from this. Naive about the adult world? Maybe I am. Did he seriously suggest that? Yeah. So I asked him, like, what would a two-state solution look like? And then this was when I was trying to leave. Like, what does a two-state solution look like? And he's like, well, Gaza would have, be part of it, and the West Bank would be part of it, and then you could build a train and a highway connecting the two. That was the solution to ending the apartheid. Bruh, and as if the Palestinian Authority isn't already corrupt and already, controlled by Israel. It's the Palestinian Authority was created to basically give Palestinians political control or give them a state. And it's completely corrupt. It's just a piece of shit. It's basically Palestinian compradors. It's Palestinian rich people who agree with everything that Israel does. That's what the Palestinian Authority is. So it would work just like that. Work scheduled me on a day I requested off, so I'm calling in the next 3 days. Nice, Cobra. Don't get fired. Shout out to the Destiny followers still around. Yeah, I didn't know how many of them existed still, but okay. He's naive about everything. Yes, he is, very much so. I think he still argues that we have democracy in America too. I heard him argue in that conversation with Emma Vigeland and Vosh that politicians respond to the populace, respond to the people, which there's thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in Washington, D.C. right now, the largest Palestinian solidarity march in history. A lot of our audience is there. So if it was true that politicians respond to the people, like Destiny said, then that would be a good thing. That would pressure Biden or put some pressure on him. But of course, politicians are actually controlled by corporate lobbyists. They're actually controlled by the economic ruling class and their corporate donors. Destiny basically said at one point in this debate that those dying Palestinian children better check their privilege. He also said that he doesn't believe in democracy. Well, there you go. Well, that was fun, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I had a blast. I was not looking forward to that. I freaking hate debates. They're not fun. You have to prepare for them. It's like preparing for a wrestling match. Dude, last thing before I leave. It was so funny when he asked me if the Palestinians still get me fired up, the Palestinian resistance fighters. And I was like, hell yes. I was thinking about them at wrestling practice just now. Actually, I know what we should play. Before I leave.
Aprovecho para condenar de nuevo desde el fondo de mi alma y de mis vísceras al Estado de Israel. Estado de Israel. Maldito sea. Terroristas y asesinos. Y viva el pueblo palestino. Pueblo heroico, pueblo bueno.
You're damn right the Palestinians get me fired up, Destiny. You're damn right they do. And so does Hugo Chavez. Free Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you all. Patreon.com/Midwestern Marx. We'll see you next time.
Cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.